everyone. This is Terry from Swamp Fox Bookstore in Marion, Iowa. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are really excited to be hosting this evening with Heather Gudenkauf and Kimberly Stuart. Just a little bit about both of them. Heather Gudenkauf is an Edgar Award-nominated New York Times and U.S. best-selling author. Of 8 novels, including The Weight of Silence, Not a Sound, and This Is How I Lied, which if you haven't read it yet, you have to. She lives in Iowa with her husband and a very spoiled German short-haired pointer named Lolo, who is often featured in her social media. And Heather is currently working on her next novel. Kimberly Stuart grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, where she learned to be snobbish about corn on the cob and good storytelling. She earned degrees at St. Olaf College. I'm from Minnesota, so I know where that's at. Yay. And it's not just because of the Golden Girls. And the University of Iowa, both fine institutions that did very little to prepare her for the lethal cocktail of parenting and writing. Kimberly is the author of 8 novels, including the Heidi Elliott series, Sugar, and her most recent, Heartland. Her books have been featured in Cosmopolitan, HuffPost, and the Chicago Sun-Times. They have been carried at Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, and Swamp Fox Bookstore in Marion, Iowa. Stuart has a passion to write chemistry-driven, smart, character-rich romance that requires a reader neither to leave her brain at the door, nor to visit a confessional after turning the last page. She's lived in Minneapolis, Houston, Chicago, Costa Rica, Nebraska, and Iowa, and she is here in Iowa now with her husband, who helped get her set up on the event tonight, and 3 wily children. So, welcome.
Thank you. We're so excited to be here.
Well, we invite everybody to chat with each other over in the chat, react to the conversation we're having here. If you have any questions for Kimberly or for Heather, you can click the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. You can put it there, and we'll just look at those throughout the night. So, how is the current situation in the world treating both of you? Are you surviving being quarantined and staying at home as much as possible? Is that helping or hurting the writing process?
You know, I think for me, okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
For me, try that again. Yeah, I'm not sure why
Let me see. Kimberly, are you getting the same feedback?
I am when Heather speaks. I don't. Anna says to mute ourselves when the others are talking. Okay, I will mute. I'll mute, and then Heather, maybe try again.
Okay.
Any other ideas, Anna? God bless you. Are you getting that when I talk? Do you hear that same thing? Oh, whoops! You guys are on mute. So I will read your lips. I believe you said no. We aren't. You're both on mute. Heather, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm only getting the feedback when Heather speaks.
Okay.
I found something here. Yeah, the solution they're giving is the one Anna gave, and that was for everybody to mute that isn't speaking.
I'll try. I will mute again. But do you want to try it again, Heather, with both of us? You see that Lane said to check that most. Are you on your phone and on the computer? No.
Heather, I'm wondering if you should back out and then come back in and see if that corrects the issue. We have not tried starting and restarting your connection to see if that works. So maybe, Kimberly, you want to tackle the question, and I'll keep an eye out for Heather to come back in?
Sure. Thank you for your patience, y'all. How am I dealing with the state of the world? I mean, just like everybody else. Every day is its own beast. So Mark and I have 3 kids. So 2 are in high school and 1 is in elementary school. And recently we went to all online. Our school district has done a phenomenal job navigating all sorts of ups and downs. And right now we're out. And so I feel like every time we get a new norm, then we move into a different norm. So, but everybody feels like that. So we are grateful to have our health, and we've had a lot of wonderful time together. Most of it's been really wonderful. Some of it has been not as. But we've caught up on a lot of movies. You know, a lot of the stuff that I usually say in my normal life, I get cranky about running too fast and going to many places and schlepping kids everywhere. And there's a lot of blessing just coming our way, just not in the way we thought of it. So I have not been writing nearly as much as I normally do because I'm never alone. But I'm really great.
And you can't go anywhere, you know? I think that's the other difficult thing is that usually when I work from home a lot, and people would be like, "Oh, this is really nice. You work from home anyways." But you normally, if you need go someplace else to concentrate, you go to a coffee shop or
Right.
you go to the library, and you can't do that now.
Right.
So,
yep, those options
Heather's
are
back.
Okay.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
I know, we tested it all beforehand and it was fine.
Yes. So great.
Thank you, Anna and Lane, for your tech support.
Yes.
Okay, Heather, your turn. How's it going?
It's been kind of crazy. We are very, like many people close to our family, so it's really been hard not to be able to see everybody as much as we hope to. So the moments we get together are really special. As for writing, I really hunkered down at the beginning of the pandemic and got busy with writing, and I got a lot done, and really is a respite, kind of a way to escape the news and what's going on in the world. And I get on my laptop with Lolo nearby and really kind of escape into that. Fortunate to be able to do that, and come back to reality after each session, of course. But we're holding our own and just thinking of everybody who's struggling right now, and our healthcare workers and teachers and moms and dads. It's a crazy time. Crazy.
So when the world isn't crazy, what is your favorite part of the writing process when you get to do it regularly and the way you normally do it?
I'd say for me, actually, it dovetails with what Heather was just saying. I love jumping into a place that's not my current place. I actually kind of like my current place, but it's still fun to go somewhere else. I like the challenge of making up fake people and spending some months with them and making their lives difficult and seeing what they do with it. Um, that's fun for me. I would say, in general, the beginning of the novel and the end of the novel are like strawberries and cream, and then the middle can be a little bit of a slog. The middle is where um, it just is like anything else. It's a discipline for me. I don't know. Maybe this is every author approaches all of these things totally individually. So Heather and I have talked shop before, and some things we do super similarly, and other things not. And there are a million ways to do it, but for me, the middle is where I really have to kind of look at my roadmap and sometimes just write, knowing that maybe the whole day's work would not see the light of day. A few years ago, I took a class at the University of Iowa during their summer writing workshop things, and it was called The Middle of the Novel. And honestly, I was so grateful to be in the class just to know that enough people struggled with this that they had a class and called it that, you know? So that was a comfort to me, because I thought maybe everybody else just skated right through those middle chapters. But so yeah, every time the middle is kind of a, am I going to make it? I get a little white knuckly, like this time it's not going to work. But it's still, even with that, I think there's some joy in there, because if you do it enough times, you start to trust yourself just a little bit.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Kimberly. The beginning is always so much fun. It's like this blank page, literally, and you just can start pouring out your ideas and getting what's in your head onto paper. I love that part of it. It's all brand new and fresh and exciting. And the middle gets tough, because once you get that first rush and you're past that, and it's like, okay, here we go. This is where the rubber meets the road. Where's this story going to go? And but I'm learning to really embrace what was always really hard for me is the revising process. For several of my books, that was the part that I really dreaded. You get your ideas on paper and you really want it to be perfect and just so, and it never is, ever, that first round. And I was always a little nervous, like what you had said, knowing that some of what you've written isn't going to end up in the book. It's just what it is. It's part of the process. It's part of the discovery process of writing. And I'm learning to embrace that a little bit more, and this is my journey, and I have to get these words out, whether they make it into the book or not. It's going to help me get to a different place. So I'm learning to be better about that, and more okay with it.
Okay, I have a question for you. So, do you think you tend towards perfectionism in your life? I mean, is that something that carries in other places too? You really like things to be, it's just writing. You want it to be good right out of the chute?
Well, no, I say no. I wish it was good. I know that it's not good, because I tend to write really ugly, and I know that. It's like everything is on the page. And am I a perfectionist? No, there's very little in my life that I'm a perfectionist about. Just ask my family. And I just when you're in the zone and everything's coming out, you feel like it's coming out right on the paper. You think, oh, this is perfect, and then you have to go back and reread, and you realize no. So no, there's nothing that's a perfectionist about me.
Do you do the reverse as well, Heather? Are there days when you think, okay, everything I just wrote is complete dribble, it's all going to end up on the cutting room floor, and then you go back and you're pleasantly surprised and you think, oh, it was better than I imagined? Do you have that happen?
Rarely, but yeah.
You're usually spot on. When you think it's junk, it really is junk.
I try not to think about it when I'm actually I do try to calm that inner critic when I am writing the first draft, for sure. Because if I paid attention to that little voice in my head that's like, oh, I don't know about this, I wouldn't get very far, I don't think. So I try to calm that inner critic a bit, and then when it comes back to the revising piece, sometimes it's very cringeworthy, and sometimes I am pleasantly surprised, like, oh, this part is a keeper for sure. So yeah.
So I'm guessing, sorry, I have another question. I really like Heather, so I just have lots of questions for her all the time. We have done this live with real people in the room too, and I fear that sometimes they're like, does she just need to have coffee with Heather? Because she has a lot of questions. I have another question for you. So when you say you are good about silencing that inner critic, you have a lot of books under your belt, and I'm wondering, did that come naturally to you, or was that a learned skill? Because I talk with a lot of aspiring writers, and that's a theme. It is really tough to teach your head to just keep moving and to get that rough draft down and not to stop the momentum, and just to know some of these things won't end up in the final. A lot of people get stuck there. So I'm wondering if for you personally, was that something you had to learn, or were you pretty good about just knowing, keep going?
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination for me. I think I'm one of those people like who, when I start a project, I kind of throw myself into it, and I don't always have all the tools or prepare. Like if I'm painting a room, I might have to leave the house 5 times to go to the store to get what I need, you know. So I just kind of throw myself into it. So I don't think I'm naturally a self-critic that way. But that said, that the voices do creep in, and I've learned that you do have to trust the process, because otherwise I wouldn't get anything done. I just, you know, I have to, I might set a timer and say, okay, I'm just going to write for an hour and just get it all out on the paper. And then I know that I'll go back later and take it through the revision process. And even then, you know, after I send it to my editor, there's always a lot more work to do too, once you get those other sets of eyes on the project too. So yeah, I think I've become more at peace with the revision process with each book, knowing that that's just what it is. How about you?
I've had to learn that for sure. I didn't, yeah, I think I have a very bossy inner critic. So I would tell her to stop it. And just knowing that there are so many versions that a book takes before the final. And even though I know that cognitively, I feel like I still have to tell my brain, you're going to come back to this. Otherwise, I can kind of get stuck. So, yeah, I think it's a learned skill. And for me, it has been. And I've gotten better at it, I think. Although I am so slow right now with my current book, I'm going to have to rewind this and listen to you and to me being really wise.
So there's a question from the chat that kind of fits in this. So what's your plan for writing a book? Do you work from an outline or not?
Oh, well, for me, you know, I've tried to change my process or tried different things with just about every book. And I love the idea of writing from an outline. I think that would be fabulous. And I've attempted it several times, and it never quite works for me. It never does. I think I know where, you know, it's going to go, and I, you know, write down my ideas and, you know, plot it out, and it tends to go off in its own direction anyway. So I've kind of learned that I do need to have a path, but it's a very vague path, at least for me to start with, and then I really will take its form and its shape in the next revision process. But I love the idea of, I think that we call them plotters, right? Plotters and pantsers. And I would really love to be able to do that, because I just think it'd be more efficient, and then I could pay more attention to some other parts of the creation process that might benefit from having that nailed down first, but it never seems to work. And the characters just take off in a completely different direction than I initially planned. How about you, Kimberly?
We've laughed about this because, well, first of all, we need to back up. Heather used an industry term. It's very technical. You'll find it in all textbooks when you get in master's and MFA. That's not true. It's not in any textbook, but we all use it. We call each other either plotters, which is a lot of what Heather just described, or a pantser, meaning you write by the seat of your pants. And so Heather does more seat of her pants. I, for my first, I think 5 books, I was totally hemmed into nap time or preschool. And so I was a pantser extraordinaire. Because just because of my life, there was not a lot of extra margin, and so I just would sit down when anyone didn't need me for 14 seconds and then write. And I got to a point where an editor actually said to me, you should give yourself some space to think about this before you write it. It was rather insulting.
Yeah, for me too.
But good advice for me, because I did, from then on, I really started doing a lot of pre-work, even before I opened the Word doc. I would just kind of live with the characters in my head a little bit. I see that Uncle Rob, who is actually my Uncle Robert, asked what comes first. Hi, Robert. He's my favorite uncle, and now you know why. Come to my virtual events. He's the best. So he asked about plot or characters which come first, and it's during that early phase that I figure I either zone in on one or the other. So and then I spend time. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but even when I'm doing the dishes, I'll think about this person, or I'll think about the plot, and then for the last 2 novels, I got an old school bulletin board that they don't sell in actual brick and mortar stores anymore. That's how old. Like a corkboard thing, and I made a map with index cards and those little plastic thingies, and just kind of just as a very general roadmap, kind of what Heather was saying, just a very general, like at about a quarter, we'll see. I'll probably be about here at about 50% through. This is the turning point. I know I'm working towards that moment. And so I found that it really helped me to kind of focus the day's work. Of course, a lot of things changed on the way to the forum, but at least I had a little bit of an idea. So yeah, that's been working for me thus far.
Oh, I think that's a great idea. When I've been well into a project, I pulled out like the big long white butcher paper and taped that to a wall and done timeline. And especially when a story goes back and forth in time. But I do really like that idea of actually having that roadmap up in front of you to refer to. So I think I'm going to give that a try for my next one.
Well, I don't want to mess with your mojo because what you're doing is working. So let's pretend that didn't happen.
Rachel Kane, when I talked to her, she said she does you were talking about index cards, she put hers on Post-it notes so she could take her Post-it notes with her when she traveled. And then she could put them up on a wall in a hotel room or, out in front of her and move things around physically that way. So we're not doing much traveling now, so Post-it notes, maybe the index cards work well, right?
That's great. That's much more portable than my 5,000-year-old bulletin board.
I still have a bulletin board right next to me, so I use it all the time. Yeah.
We are united in our ancient
One time in our old house where we used to live, I did do we painted one part of the wall in dry erase paint. And so then I could do some brainstorm. I used it for brainstorming. So I would just write all over about characters and plot and just kind of brainstorm there. And that was really fun.
That's a great idea.
Then you can erase it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I'm going to, Dee asked a question, and I know some of the things that have inspired Heather's story. So, are most of your characters a compilation of traits based on other people, or are they based closer to real, or are they completely fictional? So, are most of your characters a compilation of traits based on people you know in your lives? Is the question Dee asked.
Well, obviously, all of my heroes are based on my Uncle Robert. At least they're good-looking ones. I think any author, I mean, really, any author who tells you that she just creates these people out of the void, I think is probably not telling you the truth. Now, we would never do a direct A equals A, B equals B. I mean, we're nice people. But, I mean, I don't know what you'd have to say about that, Heather, but for sure, I've taken bits and pieces of people. I'm the kind of weirdo who, even when I was a kid, loved to sit in, a park or in the airport and just watch people and make up stories about them in my head. So that's fun for me. So I don't think that I don't have to look too far for inspiration, but for sure, there are pieces of people that I know in my books I just will never tell you, ever. And I will never write down who is who.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty similar. I tend to get my ideas from something in the news, so I'll just pick something, a news story, and then just put my own twist on it. And so the characters aren't really ever based on real people, but maybe on a real event or something that triggers something for me that I want to explore a little bit more. But yeah, it's, you have to be so careful when you're writing and describing your characters that you don't get hit too close to home, and you want to leave people wondering, is she talking about me? Although I do have a family friend who, for my book, Not a Sound, who ended up being the bad person. This person, right after this person read the book, came to me and said, I know you based the bad person after me, just the character, the way it's described. And I was like, no, absolutely not. And I swear I didn't. But when I went back and reread, it's like, oh my gosh, it kind of looks like him, kind of sounds like him. I'm like, well, maybe a little bit consciously I did.
That's hilarious.
I know.
But your friends have a better self-awareness. My friends always think they're the best people. I have a friend from high school who calls every single book and is like, that love interest was me. Every time, and it has never been. Ever. But he just thinks I see myself in this guy. So I think your friends are probably more self-aware than mine are.
I don't know, but it was pretty funny.
So kind of on that vein, this question has been asked. It says, have you had a chapter or a scene that you really loved in a story, but that you aren't sure is gonna fit in the final product of the story? And how do you deal with that as a writer when you fall in love with a scene or a character and then realize they have to go on that cutting room floor?
It happens all the time. And one thing, I've learned, I don't really throw anything away. So if something goes into it, I put it in a cut file, and who knows, it might show up in another story, another book. I've had whole characters, depart the story too. It's always hard. But it's the fact of it, because with writing, and you have to keep in the parts that move the story along and the characters that move the story along. And sometimes we might fall in love with a character or an event, but it doesn't lend itself the best way it's into the story. And that's why we have editors and early readers to kind of help us figure out what moves the story forward and what might be bogging it down a little bit. And getting those other eyes on the book is hugely important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're just too close to it. So by the end, when you finish that last chapter, when I do, I feel like I've just birthed a child. And really, I love this baby so much. And so, or I hate it. Also common in birth. So, I think it's Stephen King who says that you have to learn to crucify your darlings. Isn't that what he says? And so, something, I think that's a learned skill too, getting used to being able to look at something more objectively and say, does this serve the story? And if it doesn't, it has to go, which is horribly painful. Horribly. I mean, because we really think they're really great when we put them in there, a character or a chapter or a paragraph. Um, Lane asked if we get to decide that, or if the author does, or I mean, if the editor does. And um, I think typically, I mean, I hope I'm getting better at doing that on my own. But that, like Heather said, those fresh eyes are just invaluable because they can see what I can't. My first book, which was a lesson in self-punishment, I I turned in the manuscript, and my editor got back to me. I had a newborn baby and a 3-year-old, and this editor did not. And I think that person was thinking that my life was like his. And so he called on a Friday and said, "Hey, I read the rough. So this character needs to go. So I need you to rewrite the entire manuscript and have it to me on Monday," which is completely inappropriate. And if I had agent at the time, the agent would have been the one on the phone saying, "Actually, she's going to need more than 2 days." But I didn't know. No one was advocating for me. I got my first 2-book contract just kind of on my own at a conference, so I didn't have anybody kind of, being bossy for me. And so I killed myself taking that character, who I really liked, by the way, totally out of the book. And so I combined that character with another one. Um, so in that instance, it definitely was not the author making that decision. I think it was the right decision. It made the book better, but it was still super painful.
Yeah, and I found too that, with so fortunate with my editors too, is that they do see the big picture, and they haven't been so entrenched yet in the book that they can see beyond what I envisioned. And the advice is almost 100% right all the time. And so there's been books where I've written all the characters in first person or third person, and then my editor will suggest that I go back and rewrite the point of view differently, and that's a huge undertaking.
Right.
But there's always a reason for it, and it's always the goal is to make the book stronger and better, and it can be very painful. But it's definitely teamwork when you're working on a book with your editor or your early readers, and that those voices are so important.
So what kind of research do you do for a book? I remember, Heather, when Little Mercies came out, you said that you did some research on what it was like to be a social worker, right?
Yeah. So for that one, it's the story of a social worker who ends up on the other side of the justice system because of a mistake she makes with her own child. And I'm an educator by trade, and didn't really know any social workers, and so I reached out and ended up becoming really good friends with the social worker who met with me several times and talked to me about what it was like to be a mom and a social worker. And she didn't talk about personal cases or anything because that wouldn't have been appropriate. But just, I really wanted to know what her job entailed. And so that was just hugely important for the book to at least attempt to get that authenticity. So I really try to do that with each of my stories. My most recent one, This Is How I Lied. One of the characters is a veterinarian, so I reached out to some veterinarians who were very helpful. And since I write thrillers, there tends to be crimes in my book, so I have to have someone from law enforcement on speed dial, and I do. And so I can reach out to him by email or phone or stop in, and he very much helps me try to keep things accurate as possible.
Awesome. Yeah, I do the same. I heavily depend on people who know way, way, way more than I do. I think the goal as a novelist is to have my reader jump into that story and never be yanked out. And I especially want that to happen if that person is an expert in a particular field that I'm writing about, or geography. Um, I've had a couple books set in New York, and New Yorkers are famously prickly about geography. Um, I think I told Heather this story one time. I had a good friend who lived in New York um, for a good long while, and when I would call her, she would always tell me where she was. Like, I'd say, "Hey, how's it going?" "Oh, fine. I'm just on the corner of West 92nd and Broadway." And I was just like, "Okay, well, I'm on the corner of Merle Hay and Douglas in Des Moines." Like, who cares? But I mean, I love New York. I love visiting Manhattan, but it's hysterical. Have you found that? That they just really want you to know where they are. So, two of my books have had large portions of the books in New York. So you better believe it. I found New Yorkers who would give me very specific details about not only where the neighborhood was, what the kind of person was who would live there, but where's the nearest spot to pick up a good curry, and also would you walk from here? Would you take the subway? Would you take a cab? Because I don't want a New Yorker to read the book and be yanked out of the story because she's thinking this is not accurate.
Kimberly, we didn't tell I think it was the goat story. Was it a goat or a sheep?
Oh, you mean oh, that from Heartland, probably?
Yes, your most recent one. I love that story.
Oh man, there's a scene in my book Heartland where the person who is in charge of what's going on, the protagonist is, well, she's not in charge. She wants to be in charge, but she's part of a photo shoot, and I thought, what is the most ridiculously outlandish New York fashion scene thing for her to be a part of in this moment? And so I involved farm animals. She was going to be in charge of helping with the sheep at this very she photo shoot. And so I wrote it up. The manuscript was accepted. It was like, I think it had just come out. And wouldn't you know it, but in the mail, like 2 weeks after the book release, we got something from Banana Republic, and their entire spread was all of these emaciated, gorgeous-looking people draping themselves over sheep, live sheep, in like $500 sweaters, and then with the livestock trying to look. And I just yelped when I got it out of the mailbox. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is the thing!" And my husband was running around the kitchen like, "That's intellectual property. They stole that." I was like, "I don't think they've read my book." But so anyway, that one I wasn't even trying to be authentic, and apparently that actually happened.
Oh, yeah. That's my favorite story. So good.
So in general, I really research like a nut. I love the research part. Some people hate it, but I think it's super fun. My favorite research project was for a novel called Sugar, and I must mention this because my uncle Robert was involved. He actually is the main character in Sugar is a pastry chef, a female pastry chef in a very male-dominated profession. And I needed to know all about high-end kitchens and what she would have done to get to this position and keep it. And my Uncle Robert is a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park. And so he was a wonderful resource for me. And then I also followed around a chef here in Des Moines who was super gracious and very forthcoming. Actually, I followed him around for a number of hours, and he got more and more willing to share stories. I think he forgot what I was doing there. And at the very end, all of a sudden, he whipped his head around and said, "Wait a minute, what are you writing?" I said, "Don't worry, I won't use your name." All of a sudden, he thought, "Wait a minute, are you going to tell people what I just said?" And I sure did. But yeah, so I've had a lot of good help. It's so fun to enter into those worlds and then to get them on paper.
Absolutely.
So when did you know you first wanted to start writing, and how has your family supported you in your adventures?
For me, I was a reader first. I've always enjoyed writing, but I was always on the path to be a teacher. Ever since I was little, I knew I was going to be an elementary school teacher, and that's what I did for many years. And it wasn't until my kids were school age that I seriously started to think about writing. I mean, I'd always taken writing courses like as electives in college and really enjoyed those, but I had an idea for a book. My kids were like in elementary school, and I just thought I've got the story. I want to write it down. So I packed up my classroom for the summer, shut everything down, and started writing The Way to Silence the next day. And spent all summer working on it and finished the first really rough, bad, ugly draft before I got my classroom ready again that fall. And then I was hooked. I just loved everything about, just being immersed in the story and being excited about, getting back to the characters every day. And yeah, so it's just been something I just love doing.
Same. I didn't come to writing until after I was doing other things. I loved, I always loved to read, but I am a firstborn and very practical. And so I think if you would have asked me, how do you feel about being the author of one of those books you're reading? I would have thought, I don't know any of those people. So I'm sure they exist, but they don't hang out with me. So it just would never have occurred to me that that was a real job. So and I also was a teacher, and I loved teaching. I was a high school Spanish teacher and an ESL teacher, and I just loved it. Um, and after I started staying home with my kiddos is when um, I started frightening my husband, who would come home, and I'd gone from a very social job to a very small child who was a delightful, non-communicative being. And so when Mark would get home, I would pepper him with every question. Tell me all the words you heard today. Tell me that there were some that were like multisyllabic. Tell me what people said. And also, I do want to point out he was in dental school, and so his stories were super dumb. But it didn't matter. I wanted all of them. So what did he say when you said, "You are not a good flosser"? How did he respond? Tell me that. Oh. So Mark was the one who said, I feel like it might be time to look into a hobby or something that will preserve our marriage. So I started writing during nap time, got this clunky old laptop out, and just really more for a way for me to connect to that part of my interests. And I don't think I would have thought I had a gift at that point. Goodness, that's highfalutin. I just really was wanting to tell some stories um, and see what happens. So I started some nonfiction pieces, and then the very beginning of a novel. And for a Christmas gift, my mom and dad gave me a registration to go down to a writers' conference in North Carolina. And at that writers' conference, I met the woman who would eventually acquire my first 5 books. So it was a good trip.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I was lucky too. My family's been very supportive. That summer, I wrote The Way to Silence. My husband, every free moment, would take the kids and go do something, with them so I could write. And he just knew it was something I wanted to do. It was important to me. And so, having that support system is really, helpful to, have people. But, um, you know, you've got to really find it from within yourself for that self motivation to keep writing. You have to be in love with the story that you want to tell, because you're going to be working on it and sitting with it for months and years sometimes for some projects. And so, yeah, it's wonderful to have that support and that encouragement, but lots of times we have to find that within ourselves, stay motivated. What do you think? Kimberly.
Yes, very, very well said. Yes, I have a wonderful support system. My husband is fantastic, and my kids, now that they're verbal, also are fairly fantastic. I think the first 3 books that came, they would come in a box. You know, that's a super exciting day when you get your first, you know, you get to hold the copy in your hands. And I vividly remember at least the first 3. The kids would be like, "What is it?" And then Mark would like frantically turn it around and show him my photo and say, "This is mom. Mom wrote this book." And they'd look at me like, "What? When?" Because they were always sleeping. They didn't even know I had a life. So anyway, they're much more excited about it now. But yeah, I sadly they can't do the work for me. So it's so great that they just pour oxygen all over that flame. But at the end of every single day, um, if the book's going to get written, I have to do it. So you're right. It's a team effort, but most of it lies on your shoulders.
So a couple sort of technical like writing questions here. So Melissa asks, do you have a preference in how you start writing? Are you using Office or Google or some other type of software? Or I heard that Barack Obama wrote his book entirely longhand.
Oh, Barack! He's always showing all of us up. You can't say that out loud. What was there, a candle? Was he by a fireplace? Was he
Ink and quill? I don't know. I know for some authors when they're stuck, that's very like to grab a pen and paper really helps them. So
you say, Heather, how do you do it?
Well, I do start in a notebook or a journal first, but not the whole book because that's really not efficient at all. But I do like the idea of pen to paper, and I do always go back when I get stuck. I just changing things up a little bit helps me quite a bit. So yeah, that's really important. I'll transfer it to my laptop, and I like a laptop because I can go from when the kids were little, I'd be able to take my laptop and go wherever they weren't, and then they come find me. And find another empty room to write.
That's so true.
Being portable is really important when you're writing and have young kids. And then, as time has gone on, I've tried some different tools. There's a tool called Scrivener. Kimberly, have you ever seen that one? Or used
I've heard great things about it. Do you use that?
Yeah, I have used it, and I don't. It's very very affordable. It's not an expensive program, but there's a lot to it, and I barely tap the surface of that, what I use it for. But what I find it really helpful for is that I often write in different perspectives, and so the system lets you really manipulate the different sections of your novel with just dragging it to a new spot. So that's something that you can't really do with words. And so I find that really helpful, and it helps keep things kind of organized. But there's pieces of it too where it's almost like a digital bulletin board too. Okay. That's kind of cool. You can drop pictures in and outlining if you choose to. So yeah, I really like that as well. So a little bit of everything,
Yeah, that's great. I've heard great things about Scrivener. I will write longhand, particularly for brainstorming pieces. I keep journals everywhere in my house, by my bed, in my car, in my purse, because you just don't know when you're going to have to write about something. But I would definitely poke out both of my eyeballs if I had to write a novel longhand. I can't, my brain doesn't work like that. I have to be able to delete quickly and then write quickly. And then I don't know, it wouldn't work for me. Sorry, Barack. I guess I can't begrudge him, right? He had a very busy 8 years, so if he had time to write with a pencil, then he may do that. But I would go bonkers. I just use Word. I use old-fashioned Microsoft Word. And I, like Heather, do not throw away things. So when whole sections come out, paragraphs come out, or characters come out, I have slush pile where I put all of those things electronically because maybe it's just a little literary hoarding. Makes me feel better, but you never know. I might use them again.
So what comes to you first, the plot or the characters? Does it just depend, or is there one thing or another that grabs you?
I think for me, I get an idea for a plot first. It could be a one sentence, idea that might come to me first, and then I think about that for a while, and then the characters start to come to me, and then I'll start really trying to spend most of my time on them, and then the plot tends to follow that a little bit. But I'll keep a notebook, a journal with the characters of my book and brainstorm ideas of what they look like, they sound like, their loves, their hates, and sometimes those details end up in the book, and sometimes they don't. So I guess it really goes hand in hand. But where I spend the emphasis of the time, I think, you have to have that idea that you snag onto. But then for me, it's really about the characters.
I've done both. Sometimes the plot hits me first, and other times it's the character. If it's a character, it has to be someone who won't irritate me. Or if she irritates me, I will still want to hang out with her because you spend a lot of time with these people. So it has to be someone who's quirky enough and has enough backstory and struggles, inner demons that I want to kind of pick her apart for a while. I think at the beginning, mostly I wrote about me. I mean, it's not going to shock you. My first book was about a Spanish teacher who had a newborn. It's hard to know where that came from. Very inventive. So, and there is a little bit of me probably in all of the protagonists because I need to be able to identify at least a little bit with her. But now there needs to be a lot of dirt, I guess, and a lot of why is she doing that? What's her underlying passion? What's the carrot that she can't ever get? Or what is her biggest fear? And I need to think about that beforehand so that she's someone that's interesting enough for me to hang out with, but also my readers.
Just a couple more questions left. And before I ask the very last question, I have a couple questions I've been asking authors during this year. So one kind of more craft question here is, what do you do if you get writer's block?
For me, I go for a walk. I'll take Lolo out for a walk. I just need to get away from behind the computer or my notebook. And almost 100% of the time, going for a walk will help loosen something up in my head and give me some time to breathe, I guess, and mull some things over. It might not happen that first day. My first walk, it might be my second or third walk or even beyond. But I think getting away from the computer a little bit and giving myself some time to think and, just actually get my mind off of the writing sometimes allows something to come in that I'm willing to give it a try then.
Hear, hear. Same. Walking is magical. I'm sure there are studies about this by, I don't know, neurology people, but there's something about moving your body when your brain is stuck that just loosens things up. I don't know if you just have to think with a different part of your brain, but it works for me too, Heather. And it's just good to not be staring at the blinking cursor. I don't think a lot of good things happen with that, and so usually something will shake loose. And the other thing I would say to anyone who's an aspiring writer and worried about this, don't panic. Don't panic when you get to a moment and you think, I do not know how this is going to work. Just give yourself some distance and know that you are in very good company. That's just a very natural thing to happen. So you'll get there. Just take a breather. Go walk with Lola. Or your Lola.
Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird, which is a great writer's book. If you don't have it and you're interested in writing, it's a great one. she had a tip, and she called it the 1-inch picture frame. And when she got stuck, she bought herself a 1-inch picture frame and puts it on her desk, and she just says, "I'm just going to look at my story through this 1-inch picture frame, and I'm only going to see this little piece, and I'm only going to write about this little piece." And then that seems to help loosen things up. And if you can see that far ahead, you're not looking so far ahead. I love that piece of advice so much that I bought myself a 1-inch picture frame and put a ribbon around it and have it nearby as I'm writing. So it's a good reminder that you don't have to see so far ahead, just what's in the picture frame.
I mean, that'll preach right there. In life in general, right? I think we all get a little bit twisted up when we try to see too far ahead. So sometimes if we just look at 1 inch, just a step right in front of us. Good. Yeah. That's good advice in general.
So my first question is, what is one book that you've read so far this year that you would recommend that everybody pick up and read? I know it's hard to pick just one.
Well, currently I'm reading a Heather Gudenkauf book, and so I would highly recommend it. I'm not being paid as an endorser. I just really love her books. But let me think of another one too. Let me think.
Well, there's so many good ones. One that I really loved is by Julia Heberlin, and it's called "We Are All the Same in the Dark." And it is just it's a thriller, but it's so beautifully written that it's just, I don't know how she did it. It's this very haunting story of a crime in a small town, and the way she weaves the characters and the past and the present together, and plus just paints this gorgeous picture and the story she's trying to tell. I really love that. So it's "We Are All the Same in the Dark" by Julia Heberlin. That's what I really loved.
Well, I mean, I should have my little firstborn journal that I write down the books that I'm reading. My personality type. I have to think. In general, I really love snarky British people, and so there's a whole slew of those on that list. I love pretty much anything that Marissa de los Santos writes. She writes books that when I finish them, I close the cover and think, oh, I wish I would have written that book. That's the kind of book she writes. I also, a book that's kind of stuck with me recently is "A Woman Is No Man" by, did you read that? Too? No? Her last name, I'd have to look it up. It's, I think it's Rum. And it is not a book that will be made into a musical. So if you're looking for lighthearted, no. But it's beautifully written, and it's just a window into an immigrant's world. A female living in, I believe she is, it's been a few months now, and so I'm sorry I can't remember her country of origin, but her family of origin is definitely one that does not encourage women to have a voice. And it's just a really beautiful but heart-wrenching story, and there is a total kind of cliffhanger plot twist at the end that I didn't see coming, so I love that too. So that was wonderful too. I read all over the board. I just read a Heather Gudenkauf recommendation. You told me years ago to read River of Doubt. River of Doubt about Theodore Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorites.
That was so good too. That's a nonfiction piece I recommended that to us.
They never taught us about that in U.S. history classes, but it's a fascinating story. Yes, that's one of my favorites.
They should have taught us. I would have really been paying attention more.
I say that about every hidden history book I read. It's like, why didn't I know that women flew planes in World War II? Why did I not know they were spies? Why did I not know they worked for the resistance? Oh, wait, it's not in my history books. Life would have been much more exciting if we'd learned about, some of the characters. And I always think Hercules Mulligan in Hamilton, like, that name would have stuck with me for the rest of my life if I had learned it.
Totally.
So the last question, I think Lane has a great closing question, and she says, I've heard you have to be prepared to make great sacrifices to be fully committed as an author. Would you agree or disagree? And if so, what sacrifices have you made to fulfill your dream or passion as an author?
Wow, that's a good question. I think I don't think I've had to sacrifice anything but time. And what I mean by that is, writing when you're first starting out, there are no guarantees. And so they're day jobs. And so work, teaching full time and taking care of family, you have to sacrifice your own time, so those other things don't fall between the cracks. So I always said that I didn't do laundry, but I'd write when my kids were sleeping, or I'd write early in the morning, and so I didn't have any other hobbies really. So it was family, work, writing. So in that sense, there's some sacrifice there, but I think to be a good writer, you have to have balance in your life. I think to be good at anything, you have to have balance in your life, and you take care of yourself. You have to be mindful of those around you who you love, and you have to hone your craft. So it's really a fine balance, and you have to be okay with those choices you do make. Like for me, family always comes first, always, and I'm fortunate I get to do what I love, and it's the writing that I do love it. And fame and fortune may come, may go, but if you love the craft and the process and the actual immersion in the story, the storytelling, that's for me the exciting part.
Yeah, I would say too. I concur with everything you said, Heather, and I feel like I really feel very grateful to have this job. I really like it, and I don't feel like the sacrifices have been. I feel kind of like I don't know, self-absorbed ninny. If I said the sacrifices have been extreme, they have not. But time is precious, and I don't feel like that has become any less of a struggle as my kids have grown and my family has grown, because time is still limited. And so every time I decide to sit down and write, I am saying no to something else. And that never gets less complicated for me. Family absolutely is first, in terms of the time that I spend. But even within that paradigm, what does that look like? Some days family means we're getting takeout, and you probably didn't want takeout, but I'm still here and eating with you. But yeah, so I feel like the sacrifices have been mostly time. The other thing that I would say is there's a sacrifice of any illusion of control. So you write the best work that you can, and then so much of what happens after that is just out of your control. So you hope that it lands with a publisher that loves it and that just breathes life into it and sells it like hotcakes. You hope the booksellers catch the vision and they tell about your book. You hope that people love your book and that they don't get snarky online, and that online review will stay long past your death. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that you just can't control. And so I didn't know any of that getting into this. Um, and so that's been a learning curve for sure. There's a little bit of a sacrifice of you getting to kind of move the pieces. But in general, I think Heather would agree when I say that it's just a really fun job. And these kinds of things are so fun. We get to connect with people who are reading our books, and we also get to connect with booksellers. I'm going to do a plug. If you have not been to Swamp Fox yet, I have not physically been, but you should look right now, as soon as this is over, at how cute that store is. Look it up. And we are always, Heather and I are united in this passion to just, we are so grateful for independent bookstores in particular because they are the human face of what we do. And we know that our bread is buttered by people who can talk about books and love books the way we do. And so this is my plug. Support Swamp Fox, please. And they are so easy to find and they'll ship anything, anytime. So we are very grateful. This is a particular time where we are all kind of taking stock of what are the treasures in our community. Those are one for sure.
And we should mention, too, if you do buy a copy of Heather or Kimberly's book from an independent bookstore, whether it's Swamp Fox Bookstore or another one that if you're not from this area and there's another one in your backyard, support them. You can submit your receipt. You look on Kimberly and Heather's social media pages. They have the information how to send them your receipt so that you can get a personalized book plate. So if you're planning to get one of their books for the holidays, as a treat for yourself or a family or a friend, it can be personalized. They will get your book plate. You just have to send them your receipt. So we thank them for that and always for their support of independent bookstores. We love it. So
thank you guys for joining. Look at all these sweet comments.
I know
there's people who took time to join us. Thank you guys. So
and the fun thing is this is recorded, so anybody can watch this at any time. It'll be out in the web for a while. So, thank you to everybody that stopped by live or is watching the replay. There's the buy the button books button that will take you to the books we have in stock of Heather and Kimberly's. I said, if you have another independent bookstore in your backyard, please, look at them or you can support Swamp Fox Bookstore. We love Heather and we love Kim and Kimberly, and we hope we can have you in person someday soon.
Let's do it. I would love it.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.